Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me for another tutorial. I'm Erin Eno, and today we're going to be painting these cute little whimsical flowers. If you do like this tutorial and you want to see more like it, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and also please let me know by giving it a thumbs up. Now grab your paints and let's get started. Today I am painting in my Artisto watercolor pad. It is 9 by 12 and it is a cellulose paper, but it is 140 pound. So if you haven't invested in cotton paper yet, if you're still a beginner, then this is perfect for you. I have my Royal Talens Van Gogh paints in my palette. I have a jar of water and a paper towel, and I have 3 brushes today. I have a Princeton Neptune in a size 12 round. I have a Princeton Heritage in a size 6 round, and I also have a Raphael No. 2 script liner. If you don't have one of these, you'll just need like a really small brush, like a size 1 or 0. I may get away without using this if I find that the tip on this Heritage brush is fine enough for me to use, but we'll know once we get into it. So to start off, oh, and I've also taped my paper down because this is a pad, it's not a block. This paper doesn't warp too much, so I'm okay with just taping down the 2 edges, or the 2 bottom corners. If you're using a paper that tends to warp, you might want to tape it down to a board on all 4 sides. We're not using a ton of water, but we're using enough that could cause some warping. So first of all, I want to wet my entire sheet, and I'm not going to go from complete edge to edge on this little painting, but I do want to wet down my entire sheet just to start, and I'm just going to do that with a spray bottle. I just find it is a lot faster, and then I'm just going to finish it up with my Princeton Neptune. So if you don't have a big kind of moppy brush like this, it's best just to kind of spray your sheet down and then just finish it off with the largest brush that you have. Okay, so my whole sheet is basically wet. It's not drenched. You don't want it pooling. You just want like a nice kind of sheen to it. Okay, and I'm just tipping my sheet to see if there's any dry spots, and I think we're okay. So now that that's done, I'm going to go in and just get the tiniest amount of pink. I don't want too much. We're just going to put some little hints of pink in, and we're going to have a ground line here right about here, okay, but above that I just want to put a few little hints of pink in just to kind of soften things up, put a little interest in this. And it's going to dry lighter, remember, okay, everything that you put down, especially the wetter it is, the lighter it's going to dry. And I think I also want to put in just a little bit of green. I've got a mixture of green over here. It's kind of like a muddy green, so I'm gonna just add a little bit more sap green to that. And I don't want too much on my brush. And we're gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna put in a few little hits of just some green here and there. Not too much. If you think you've put down too much, you just want to kind of soften it a bit. I want it very light when it dries. Okay, so I'm just kind of spreading that out a bit. Okay, and then for the ground line, I'm going to go in and get some Azo Yellow Medium, and I'm going to add some of that green to that. I just want it slightly on the greenish side, and I'm going to put that all along the bottom, and we want that really watered down too. That might be a little heavy, so I'm going to kind of water it down and fade it out. I think I'm just going to pick some of it up. It's maybe a little heavy down here. Okay. So we've got a little ground line here. It's just a little hit of green. Just going to put a couple of strokes of green in here just at the very top of that ground line. And it's going to kind of blur out because the whole paper's wet, and that's fine. And we're going to put that brush away. And I'm going to go to my size 6 round. And we're going to go into that yellow, azo yellow medium. And it's not like a lemon yellow, okay? So if you don't have azo yellow medium and all you have is like a bright, cool yellow, just put the tiniest amount of pink or red in there. And I mean just the tiniest amount. Okay, so now I've just dipped my brush in my water and just run it along the mouth of my jar just once, because I don't want too much water on here, but we're just going to go in and start putting in some really loose kind of 4 or 5 petal flowers. And these are going to bleed out. And you don't have to fuss about these. See how much that's bled out already? Now if this paper's drying unevenly, like it's a little dry over here, it's not going to bleed out as much, but that's okay. You can just kind of rinse your brush off and just pick some of that up. And maybe we'll do one up here. One up here. And maybe one last flower up here. You don't need to fill the whole page. Okay, just like that. And as that sits, it's going to dry off a little bit. But in the meantime, I'm going to mix up a light kind of brown, and I'm going to go in with burnt sienna, which is kind of a reddish brown. And maybe put in just the slightest amount of sepia, just to kind of tone that down a bit. Okay. And I'm going to go in with just the tip of this brush, and this is where I say I may use my script liner, but I'm just going to go in and see if I can do it with this. And we want to make these little kind of curved and dancey kind of stems. Okay, so I'm going to put a stem here just like that. Didn't want that going right into the flower. From this guy, maybe we'll just do curving that way. That way. Okay, so you're just putting in stems and just in making sure they kind of curve and dance around. Just like that. Then we're going to go into the green. So I've got a mixture of sap green with a little bit of yellow. And we're going to do the same thing, but it's just going to be like little stems of leaves now. Okay, so I'm just going to do just a slight line, maybe come up here a bit. I didn't want all that there. I'm just going to pick a little bit of it up with my finger. Just like that. Then we're going to go in and just put these little kind of playful fern-like kind of leaves on here. So I'm just doing these little lines, not leaf shapes, just kind of little whimsical kind of wildflower leaves. Okay, so I'm just doing these really light, playful kind of spiky lines. Just like so. And you don't have to make it too busy, just enough to kind of fill in those voids a little bit. And they're not too dark, as you can see. I don't want them overtaking the flowers. And then now when the flowers are a little bit drier, I'm going to go in with the Azo Yellow Medium again, and we're just going to do more kind of deliberate petal shapes. Okay, so you've got these kind of defined petals now on top of the soft bleeds. That one was still a little wet. And I'm not leaving white space for the centers because we will go in and put centers in these little flowers. Okay, so just more deliberate petals. And it's a thicker mixture of paint this time. Not a thicker mixture of paint, but I have less water on my brush. So that's why it's not bleeding. And that's what you want. The only one I see an issue with is this guy right here. So I'm just gonna tap some of that up, get some of that water off of there, and just go back in and put our more deliberate petals in. Just like so. Okay, and I'm going to let those dry off a bit before we go in and do the centers. So now I want more defined stems. So I'm going to go put some more sepia into this little mixture with the burnt sienna, so it's a little darker. And I think I will switch to my script liner this time. So if you have a smaller brush, now you want to go down to your smaller brush. It doesn't have to be a script liner. This just holds more paint, so I don't have to go and reload it as often. And we're just going to follow the stems that we already did. I'll start over here. I'm just going to start at the bottom and go up. Just like so. So you've got this defined stem going over top of that kind of wider, lighter stem that we did originally. Okay, so you see how fine that is? That's why you're going to need like a size 1 or a 0, okay? And we're just going to do our little wavy stems. This one can be a little darker, I think. And we can do the same thing with the green. And I'm not going to do all the stems in the darker green because I don't want the leaf stems to overtake. They're just kind of, I guess we'll call them kind of filler in this case. Okay, so you want to keep them still fairly light. But I just wanted to define some of them a little more. Okay, so now that the flowers are dried a bit, I'm going to go back to my number 6 round. And I'm going to tap most of the water off my brush, so it's pretty dry. I'm going to go in with a little bit of sepia added to that mixture, and we're just going to dot some centers in these flowers, and it's going to bleed. But you don't want it to bleed too much, so you don't want your paint really runny. Okay, so more pigment than water. And I'm going to rinse and dry off my brush, and I'm just going to kind of drag some of this pigment from the center out into the petals. Okay, so it just gives a little shape to these petals. This flower is quite big. I didn't really want it that big, but that's okay. So I'm just doing this by putting my brush in the center of the flower and just kind of flicking out, okay? And you can see it just adds a little shape and definition to these petals. And now that we've kind of pulled some of that pigment out, we can go back in, just adding a little bit more sepia to that mixture, and I'm just going to tap in the centers again, just to make them a little deeper. Now what we want to do is we want to take this mixture again, which I'm running low on, so I'll just mix a little bit more. So that was burnt sienna and some sepia. Well, that was a lot of sepia. Don't need that much. And you're just going to take a little bit on the tip of your brush. And we're just going to kind of define this ground line. Okay, so I'm just dragging it all the way across. And while it's still wet, I'm going to rinse my brush off and just run it all under this ground edge here so it bleeds down. Just like that. And to avoid blooms or hard edges, because we're now adding water to this ground, I'm just going to make sure that I just kind of wet it all the way down, just so it kind of dries evenly. And if you want to go in and add a little bit more green to some of the areas while this is wet now, you can do that too, just to add a little bit of interest. Okay, so we're going to let that sit. And I'm going to go back into the green with my liner brush now. Because now that I see this, I think I do want to heavy up some of these stems a little bit and the leaves. I'm not going to go over the entire stem. I'm just putting these little wisps here and there, just adding a little more tone to those. Okay, so again, if you don't have a liner brush, you're using the smallest brush you have. And even with that, you're just still doing a really kind of light touch. Just little flicks like that. Just little spiky leaves. Just by doing the little kind of spiky leaves, it just makes it that much more kind of playful. That one might have been a little heavy. And like I say, you don't have to heavy up all of them. We can go in and add some darkness just to some of these stems. And then you'll see that I'm not doing the whole stem. I'll just do like a little bit and then maybe skip down there, do a little more. I don't want them really like kind of outlined. I just want them kind of dancey and fun. Just like that. Okay. So now that our petals have had a chance to kind of sit a little bit, now you can go back in and add even more darkness to those centers, just to make them pop a little bit. And they're not going to bleed so much now because it's a little drier. And you can also go in and do the same thing if you want more shape to your petals. So I'm drying off my brush and just going in with the very tip of my brush and just dragging out more tone in some of these petals. And the reason why I'm doing this, you know, 2 or 3 times is because I didn't want to start off really heavy. So you want to just kind of build this. You don't want to put too much paint down right out of the gate, or your flowers will look just be a little too heavy and they'll lose that kind of whimsical, soft look. Okay, you could even beef up some of these petals a little more. And I think that's good. And I will go back in and darken up those centers even more. But what I want to do now is just go into this dark mixture, just a little bit on the tip of your brush. And I'm just going to put some of it just below each flower. I'm not doing the leaf stems, I'm just doing the flower stems. Okay, so there's one here, here, there, last guy here. And then we're going to tip your paper and clean your brush off, and it's wet, and I'm just going to kiss the bottom of where we've just put that sepia. And I'm just tipping my paper so it will bleed down a little bit. Okay, and you can just run it off your sheet. And all that's doing is just creating these little areas of darkness where each of the flowers pop out, just to make it a little, just to kind of ground them, basically, is what it's doing. So now that that's done, we're going to have one last little kick at the can and put some of that really deep sepia in the middle of each flower. And that's it, other than I'm just going to extend that stem down a little bit. Didn't quite hit the ground. And I think I just want to soften this up just a titch. I'm going to do one more run with my brush under that ground line, like so. And I think I will also take my script liner. So you would go down to your size 1 or 0, and I think I'm just going to just very lightly flick some of this sepia out. I don't want to take it all from the center, but I just want to add a little more depth and interest to the little petals. Okay, so I'm just kind of flicking. I don't want to remove it, so I don't want to disturb it too much, but it's just enough to kind of define those petals a little bit. Give the flowers a little bit of depth. So my brush is almost dry, okay? Just putting a little bit of life back into these petals. Now I chose yellow just because I thought it was just nice and sunny, but you can just do this with pink flowers or blue. But the idea is just to have them kind of light and dancey. And I think what I want to do is just take the sepia on my liner brush and just kind of heavy up some of these stems just a little bit more. Just to kind of ground them a little bit. And you'll see I've got double lines because I'm just kind of sketching. Well, that just adds to the kind of movement of these stems. Just like so. So that just heavied them up a little bit just to make them a little more prominent. And there you go. That's just a quick little kind of fun little whimsical dancing flower painting. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful, and I really hope you'll give it a try. If you do and you're on Instagram, don't forget to share and tag me so I can have a look. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining me and supporting my channel. Take care, and I'll see you next time.